we discuss understanding scale. We'll go through different examples of how scale can be used effectively when you're inserting various views onto different worksheets at different scales, and how printing at different scales is going to affect that as well. Once we're finished the presentation, we'll open up the chat panel where you can type in questions that you might have about scale. Following the entire presentation, I'll send you a booklet, and that booklet will have information on scales in it so you can read about the different settings that we go through in today's class. So let's get started in understanding scale. When you're working in the Envisioneer environment, you're always working in a scaled environment. It's not a one-to-one environment, it's a scaled environment right from the beginning. To look at the scale settings while you're drawing the model, you come up to the View pull-down menu, and under the View pull-down menu, you'll see View Properties. In the View Properties dialog box, it will tell you the current scale of that particular view. So here in our model view, we have a 1/4 inch equals a foot scale. When we're looking at that scale, that's going to affect the model and how you're drawing it and all of the dimensions you put in. So for every foot that you draw, it's represented by a 1/4 of a foot. I'm going to click OK there. So for those of you that might have come from a different drafting background, perhaps AutoCAD, where you're drawing one-to-one and then you're inserting views at various scales, Envisioneer is different in the fact that you're always in a scaled environment. So when we're drawing our model, as a default, in the shipping copy of the software, it automatically is set to a 1/4 inch equals a foot in your model. So if you wanted to alter that, if you know you always will be printing and doing everything at an 1/8 inch equals a foot, or you'll be doing some other alternative scale all the time, go to View, View Properties, and in there you can set that scale for the model. When you're looking at bringing over views of your model onto the working drawing sheets, you can insert them on each sheet all at different scales, and I'm going to show you that right now. I'm going to go to this sheet, my first sheet. These sheets as well are at a scaled environment. So again, right now if I go back up to View, View Properties, now I'm looking at the view of this particular sheet. So this is my sheet 1, and my sheet 1 is at a 1/4 inch equals a foot. Same scale as my model view. The working drawings that are created, the title blocks, were all created at that 1/4 inch equals a foot scale as well. But when I bring my model in, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to bring it in at a 1/4 inch. If I want to bring it in at a reduced scale, I can do so. By coming up to Define Smart View, I can insert my model, my plan view of my model, at any scale I want. So if I want to bring it in at an 1/8 inch scale, I can do so. And I'm just going to turn off the visibility of the terrain and perhaps the roof just to clean up this view when we do bring it in so it's a little clear. So I'm bringing it in at an 1/8 inch equals a foot, and all I have to do is hit Insert. And there's that reduced floor plan. I'm going to do the exact same thing, define a smart view, and I'm just going to zoom in on a portion of our model right here, and perhaps I'll even make that smaller. What you see here is what you are inserting, and again I'm going to turn off the visibility of the terrain and the roof so it cleans up our view a little bit, and I'm going to leave it at a 1/4 inch equals a foot. And all I'm bringing in is what we see in this preview, and I'm going to insert this one right beside it. What I want to illustrate with that, if I zoom in, this one's at a 1/4 inch, this one's at an 1/8 inch. If I zoom in on those two, notice that the dimensions stay the same. It doesn't matter what scale you're going to change your model to, we keep your dimensions nice and consistent for you. So if you blow a view up to a 1/2 inch or you reduce it down to an 1/8 inch or keep it at a 1/4 inch, all the way across your worksheet, you're going to have a nice, consistent scale on your all of your dimensions and all of your text. They're going to remain the same. Okay, let me bring in another one. Define a smart view, and this time I'm going to zoom right in on this portion right here with some dimensions, and let's bring that in at a 1/2 inch equals a foot. 1/2 inch. So this one's at an even bigger scale. hit Insert, plop it right in here. And again, if we take a look at those dimensions and the text, nice and consistent. When we're looking at bringing those in, remember we're always in that 1/4 inch equals a foot. This environment that I'm in is a 1/4 inch, even though one of the views I brought in was at an 1/8 inch, one was at a 1/4 inch, and one was at a 1/2 inch. So if I zoom in here, and I come up to do some perhaps measuring. If I measure this distance from here to here, look down towards the bottom of my screen, you'll see that it's matching the scale, 17'10". That's my 1/4 inch. If I do that again down here and measure the distance for the one that I brought in at a 1/2 inch, see the distance difference there? It's thinking it's 9 feet, even though it's 4'6", because it's brought itself in twice as big, but it's retained that original scale and dimension of 4'6", but it's twice as big now at that 1/2 inch scale. Okay, so you can bring them in all at different scales, but when you are using the dimensioning tools, dimensions, linear dimension, it's going to keep and retain that 1/4 inch equals a foot distances in this environment, because that's the total environment scale that's on this worksheet. So if I insert a dimension, it's thinking I'm working in a 1/4 inch. So if I come down here to this linear dimension right here, and I want to put it in on this plan, and perhaps I want to dimension this fireplace unit from here to here, and put this dimension on my plan. It's telling me that it is 10'5½", and I know that that's doubled up, that when we're looking at that distance now, because I put that dimension in, it's saying it's 10'5", it's actually half of that distance, because we've scaled this up by 2. So if I select that dimension, I want to draw your eye over here to the object properties. Now that I've selected that dimension, a quick way of changing that dimension so it's reading correctly is to come over here to this value scale. The value scale there means I want to reduce the value of the scale of that dimension by half. So bringing it down to 5'2 3/4". Okay. The scale above it, this scale means I'm going to increase the size of this dimension. So if I do times it by 2 there, see how it gets twice as big? So I can increase the scale of it so it's bigger on the screen if I'd like to by scaling it. The value scale is going to take the value, the dimension that's written there, and decrease it or increase it depending on the percentage that you put there. So I put 0.5 to scale it back by half, and it brings it in then at the actual value because I'm in that 1/4 inch equals a foot. We also have below, if you want to override that scale, you could actually type something in there and it will override it and type in that new dimension that you've put in. It will not value scale the override. When you put in override, it will automatically just override any value that's in there. It won't scale it as well. If I backspace that back out, it brings back in my value scaled unit. Okay, so a couple things we've learned. Each environment in Envisioneer is a scaled environment, whether you're in the model space or in the worksheet. When you're looking at their scales, you come here to the view properties, and that will tell you the scale of that environment. So in both the model space, where I'm drawing my model, and on the sheet that I'm currently working, both of them are at a 1/4 inch equals a foot. All of our worksheets, the default worksheets that you find in our software, have been drawn at that scale as well. Any views that I insert onto these sheets can come in at any scale. When I'm defining the Smart View, that's when I tell it what scale I want to bring it in at. And when I insert those, they come in at that scale that I've specified, but the text and dimensions remain constant. So you have a nice, consistent look throughout your plans. If you want to add further dimensions while you're out here on a worksheet, and you've inserted a view at a different scale, That's when we can take advantage of that value scale in the object's properties. Dimension it, use the tools, dimensions, linear dimension tool, and then value scale it. I'm going to come to a different sheet now over here on sheet 2, and I'm going to again define a smart view. And this time I'll do an elevational view because that seems to be where we mostly reduce and increase the size of our scale. So I'm going to bring in this front elevation. And when I bring in this front elevation, I'm going to bring in 1 at an 1/8 inch scale. And I'm going to hit Insert. A copy of that elevation, that front elevation, is going to attach itself to my cursor. And then I'm going to, again, define a smart view and an elevational view again. And this time I'll leave it at 1/4 inch equals a foot. And I'll insert it directly below. When I have these two elevations in, both at different scales, you can see the difference between the two of them. When I come down to go to Tools, Dimensions, Linear Dimension, when I'm looking at my secondary inserted elevation, the one I brought in at 1/4 inch, any of the dimensions that I do here, because I'm at a 1/4 inch environment, are going to be the exact dimension that I need. Again, at the other dimension, this one that I inserted at an 1/8 inch, when I go back up to Tools, Dimension, Linear Dimension, and type in the actual dimensions, they're going to be at a reduced scale. So if I zoom in there nice and close, we can see that this dimension here is 3'8". If I select it, this is where I can come along and say, I need this one to be twice as big, the value of that scale. Because it's been reduced, I brought it in at an 1/8 inch, which is actually half the size of my 1/4 inch environment, so I need to scale it up by 2. Okay, so you have the ability to bring in at any scale and then alter the dimensions if you want to as well. Now I have a 1/4 inch equals a foot drawing sheet on my desktop here. I have one of the views at a 1/4 inch, one of the views are at a 1/8 inch, and now I need to go print it. When I come up to File and Print, the print dialog box comes up, and I'm just going to print this to a PDF, and I'm going to bring it right to its actual paper size of Arch D and its landscape orientation. Here we'll see that we have different scaling environments when we go to print it as well. This one says fit it to the page. Whatever I can do to print this as large as I can on that Arch D piece of paper, maximize out the actual drawing to print it to nicely fit onto that page. The other option that we have is print to scale, recognizing that I'm printing this to scale and print it to the scale. Right now I'm printing all extents, which means it's going to look out and beyond my drawing sheet. If there's anything out there, it's going to try to print to it too. And you can see when it does that, it takes the area of my sheet, here's my sheet right here, that it's trying to print, and we've got these two lines coming across. That means it's going to try to print out to scale my drawing, but it's going to take 4 pieces of paper to do it, to print this out to scale, because I'm zoomed out to the extent and trying to print that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, don't print out to the extent. I want to print to a window. When I print window here, it allows me to print that I want to print from that corner to this corner right here. And now you can see I'm printing to scale, and it's reducing it down to 1 sheet. So when you're printing, you have the ability to say, I need a 11 by 17 piece of paper, fit it to the page. It's going to disregard any scale you've previously set and just fit it to that page. Whatever scale it can mash it down to print it on 11 by 17, it's going to do it. The scale's not going to be right, but it's going to print it nicely on an 11 by 17 for you. When you want it to print to scale, then you print that particular scale, pick print to scale. Now, the view scale is a 1/4 inch equals a foot. But I could also say, well, my print scale, I want to be an 1/8 inch. See how it reduces it on the sheet? So here's my 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. I reduced my print scale by half to an 1/8 inch equals a foot, and it puts it right in there. If I brought it up to a 1/2 inch equals a foot, see how we then get our 4 sheets of paper? I would need 4 separate pieces of paper and tape them together to get this plan printed out at a 1/2 inch equals a foot on an arched D piece of paper. 4 pieces of arched D pieces of paper pasted together to fit. But at my 1/4 inch, it fits just nicely. A common question we get into technical support is when I'm trying to print, it's too big for my paper size. That means one of two things has to happen. Either you reduce your scale or you choose a bigger paper size. So right now my arched D paper fits perfectly because this out here, this title block is an arched D 24 by 36 piece of paper. But if I reduce that and I brought it down to a arch B piece of paper, see how I would need 4 pieces of paper to print out this entire plan at a 1/4 inch scale. If I didn't care about the scale, I just knew I only had that size of paper and I had to print it out, scale was not important at this point, maybe it's a preliminary, then I can say fit it to the page. It will do its best to print that view on that sheet of paper at whatever scale it's going to take. If I want it to fit, so I print to scale, I can see it's not going to work. I need 4 pieces of paper. So I can say, let's reduce that down then to an 1/8 inch. Does it fit? Yes, it does. So I can reduce the scale of the drawing to print that out. And that'll bring that whole scale of the whole environment down to an 1/8 inch. So I can print that out on that sheet. So we have the views that we can print, insert onto our sheets at any different scale that we want to. And once they're in here, we can change the value of any dimensions that we need as well by overriding the size. And when we go to print, we have 2 options. We can print it to scale or fit it to whatever sheet we can. So those are options that you have when you're going to alter the scale of something and how you can scale it. Once a view is inserted, so I've brought in this view right here, and we know that we brought it in at an 1/8 inch equals a foot. What if I then later on wanted to increase the scale? Well, I can left click to select it, and you can see it's all highlighted, that one view. And then I'll draw your attention to the right to our object properties again. Here we'll see redefine the settings. When I hit redefine, it brings me back into that view window where I can see the view that I've inserted. And then I can come over and choose a different scale. So if I then wanted to bring it in at a 3/16 equals a foot, I could choose update, and it will scale that up for me and increase the scale. There we go. The original dimension is no longer valid because it was taking it from an 1/8 inch, so I'm going to left click to select it and then hit delete on my keyboard to get rid of it. But now I have this view inserted at a 3/16 of an inch. So I can always redefine them as well. What if you're bringing in a block? So I'm going to go to my next sheet. Up at the top of our screen here, we have import a CAD file. I'm going to select that tool. And in my open dialog box, I'm going to go to our details tab, and I'll put this foundation footing detail and click open. Gives me a preview of my detail. And in the text of this detail, I can see that the scale is a 1/2 inch equals a foot. I'm bringing that in to my 1/4 inch equals a foot environment. So if I want it to still be a 1/2 inch equals a foot, I'm going to have to scale it up by 2. It's a 1/2 inch equals a foot detail, but when I bring it in, if I left it at scale 1 to 1, it's going to bring it down to a 1/4 inch. If I still want it to be a 1/2 inch equals a foot, then I would scale it up by 2. And then I hit insert. And a copy of that detail attaches itself to my cursor, and it's inserted. And now I can see the detail. What if I wanted to change the scale of the detail? What if I wanted to scale it up or down? Well, we can edit the block's definition and scale it up, or once I've got it selected here, I can go to the Modify pull down, and under the Modify pull down, I have Scale. So I could put my cursor down in this lower left-hand corner to say I want to scale it from this point, and I want to bring it down by half. So maybe it's at 1/4 inch equals a foot. Click OK, and now it's half the size. Again, select the detail, the Modify pull-down menu, choose Scale, tell it where you want it to scale it from. I'm going to left-click right there, and then I'm going to say scale it up by 2. And now it's twice as big again. So once you've inserted static views like this, details, you can scale them up. I wouldn't recommend scaling your elevation views. I would much prefer you use this redefine the settings. So it's going to those settings and remembering those settings. But there's nothing stopping you from scaling that as well, telling it I want to scale it right from the middle and saying bring that down half the size. Click OK. Oh, 1:1, sorry. Bring that down, Modify, Scale. From this point, half the size, and bringing it down half. But by coming here and saying redefine the settings, much better way of handling that, and saying I'm going to my 3/16 again, update it, it'll take a look at it, and it'll scale it appropriately for you. So you have for things like our details, those can be inserted and scaled afterwards, bringing them in at any scale that you want, and then go to Modify, pull down, and inserting the view that you want. But for our elevations, our floor plans, things like that, redefine the settings of what you're bringing in and make sure that you're bringing it in at the scale that you want to bring it in at. Talked a lot about various scaled items today, looking at details, looking at printing out at scales. We looked at the overall environment that we're in, your view properties and how they all have a set scale. You're in a scaled environment at all times. How you can alter the scale when you're printing in these views as well. I want to go directly to your questions today and leave a lot of time for questions on scale. So we make sure that we're answering the specific questions that you might have about scaling an object or scaling a view or scaling a print. In your GoToMeeting console, on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a chat option there where you can type in questions that you might have. I'm the only one that can read them, so please never hesitate and be shy to type in a question. I'll be able to answer those for you live here. And if you have that question, probably everybody does. So make sure you type in your questions, and we'll go directly to questions right now so I can answer them for you. Looking back, already got quite a few. When you redefine a smart view, it updates at a default setting of 1/4 inch equal to foot. If the original view was 1/2 inch, is there any way to make the updated view retain the original scale? Is this a function of the worksheet scale? It is. So if I go back to our sheet 2 here, and I come to this view that was 3/16, when I come back over here to say redefine the settings, it automatically looks at the view scale. So the worksheet number 2, what's its default scale, and it automatically populates it here. It doesn't look at the view that you've inserted, it looks at the default scale that's on that sheet. And then from here, you can choose whatever scale that you want it to be and update it, and it will update itself. But it's looking as a default every time it goes into that dialog box at the default scale of that particular sheet. Next question. Is there a way to set up which line type has priority? For example, the dashed line of a ceiling edge will override the solid line of my wall surface. The only way you could do that, no, there's no way of prioritizing which one is overviewing the other one. It usually goes over which one's taller, which one's sitting up higher, and that's the one that's going to have the priority. So your ceiling line, because it's sitting up higher than your wall line, will take the priority, but there's no way of putting one front to back or moving them around. and some questions about worksheet that I might answer offline. I just want to keep it to scale just so we make sure that we have everyone's scaling questions today. So if I'm skipping over your question, it's just because I want to directly go to all the scaling questions first. If I wanted to print out on an 8.5 by 11 paper from printer, just a small portion of, say, the bathroom, how can this be done? Okay, good question. So I'm going to go back over to this sheet. All I want to print out is just maybe this bathroom in this corner right here. That's all I care about for printing, but I want to make sure that it's printing out to scale. File, print. When you have something like that specific, and we're going to choose a piece of paper here, so I'll go to my local printer that only does 8.5 by 11. Right now, when you want to print out a specific area, don't use all extents. Make sure you're using window. The window option allows you to go right out to your model and look around and put a little box around exactly what you want to print. So you can see the window that I created is just around that bathroom area. So I've chosen a 1/4 inch, 8.5 by 11, shown it which area I want to print, and then I can tell it what scale I want to print it at, 1/4 inch equals a foot. So it's exactly to scale, just that bathroom area. It's on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and I would choose print. So things to remember are, when you're printing out, window is probably the biggest helpful factor there for you. Just that one small portion, make sure you window around just what you want to print. When you have just that area chosen and your sheet size, if you even wanted to increase the scale, so I want to say, well, I can make that even bigger, I'll make that 1/2 inch equals a foot. And now I'm printing to a scale, and it's on that 8.5 by 11 for me. When I'm printing to PDF, so I can send my drawing to a printer, how can I best scale it? Okay, so here is my drawing. I want to print that out, send it to PDF. It's got to be to scale. File, print. When I'm sending this off to my print house to be printed, I want to indicate by a PDF, so I'm going to choose my PDF writer. When you choose a PDF writer, you can choose absolutely any sheet size associated that PDF writer can write to. Most of them can print to any sheet size. All of our sheets are an Arch D piece of paper. You'll notice in some of your printer options, you might have ANSI D as well. Yeah, I've got ANSI D too. That's an entirely different sheet size. It's not 24 by 36. It's a different size. So make sure that you're choosing the actual architectural Arch D paper size. I'm going to change my orientation to landscape. Again, the biggest thing that's going to be helpful for you here, don't allow it to choose the all extents or the display for your print. Be very specific on what you want to print. Pick window. And then when you choose window, this little window button will appear. Pick that window button. It takes you back out to your drawing sheet, and then window around by left-clicking once, and then left-clicking on the other corner of exactly where you want to print. That'll show it what you want to print, and then you can print it to scale. Okay? If you don't use that window area, it's going to look out to the extent of that entire drawing area, or what's currently in the display, which includes a lot of white space all the way around it, and it's going to try to print it too. So when you choose window, you can be very specific. I'm printing from here to here only. And then it'll take the scale for you. And then you hit print. It prints it to scale as a PDF. You can send that off to your local print company, and they'll be able to print that off for you. Okay, let me just go back and review all of our questions that we might have there, just to make sure that I've answered all of our print questions. Okay, that seems to be all of them. That's all the print questions, but I want to make sure that if you have any further questions, make sure you type them up, and I'll be able to answer them for you here live during our broadcast, so make sure you do send those out. A question was asked about, off topic, but is there a way to export the available layers from a worksheet? No, we have all of our layers down here. These are what gives everything their color, their line weight, their line type, but they remain here in the software. You can't export them out. The only way they get exported out, all of your different layers, is if you actually export out a DWG file. When they export out, it'll take their layers with them, but it can't export them out onto a table of any kind. Okay, and that seems to be all of the questions. I'm going to hold the chat line open for another minute, just in case any other questions come in, and we'll be able to answer those for you. Oh, here's another one. Does CADSoft have a sheet that indicates what the various sheet sizes are? Yes, we do, and I'll send that out in today's class. So when you're printing out, if you're not familiar with the sheet sizes, the names that have been associated to them, so what is an Arch D? Well, that's a 24 by 36. I'll include a piece of paper today that gives you the standard sizes for each of these paper sizes so that it'll be a little table. So Arch D is 24 by 36. Arch C is our 18 by 24. Arch B, and going all the way back to Arch A. And Arch E, which is a 36 by 48. So each of these names, and when you take them to your print house, you could tell them you want an Arch E piece of paper. They'd be very familiar with that name, and they'll print it out to a 36 by 48 for you. But I'll give you a little table in the email that I send you today so that you can look at these various names and know the associated size of that piece of paper as well. I've inserted doors with labels, and the labels always come in huge. What should I look for? Okay, let's go back over here into model space, and I'm going to zoom in on a door. I haven't put any labels on this door, so I'm going to click on, I might have my walls turned off there, yep. I'm going to grab this door and turn on that I want it to be on. Use an auto name, click on. So here's my name for that label. If I come up here to Settings, Program Settings, Element Mark Settings, chances are that when you're getting huge labels, that the text style here has been set to something that's huge, maybe default. Hit Apply and OK. See how it's absolutely huge there? Probably don't have a default text size set. So if you come back up here to Settings and Program Settings, and I'm just going to wait because I see that there's a screen delay. I might just back all of that right up. Okay, I'm just going to come in, and I see some of you are on a screen delay. I'll just hold that for a minute here. With your doors, and I'm going to look at the properties of the door. Under the Quantity tab, we can include a mark. And that was something new for version 10. So I'm going to put Auto Marks are on. See how huge that mark is? The reason that mark is huge is because under my settings, Program Settings, Element Mark Settings, the text style that I've set for my door marks is set to default. And default is a huge text size. So if I take that back down to standard and hit Apply and OK, see it brings it back down to a nice size. So if you have really huge door marks, go up to your Program Settings, Element Mark Settings, and set the text style to a smaller text style. See if we have any other questions. I'm not finding an Arch D size on my Pro Architect. Pro Architect won't give you the different print sizes that you have in your print dialog box. It's going to be the printer itself that you're using. So if I went to my brother printer here, I wouldn't have an Arch D either. It's not a capability of that particular printer to print out to that particular size. But when I go to my desk PDF printer and I look at the options there, then I have an Arch D piece of paper. So if you're not seeing Arch D as a paper size, it's not the software that's limiting it. it's the printer that you're using. So try maybe updating the printer driver if you know that it should be a capability to have that size of paper, or try a different printer altogether. It's a capability of the printer to print to different sizes, not the software. Okay, does that answer all the questions that I have up there so far? So if you have any questions, we'll hold that line again for one further minute. I hope that gave everyone in today's class a good introduction to scale. We're working in that scaled environment, how to insert at different scales, how to print at different scales, how to scale an object up once it's in, how to alter the dimensions of a scaled object. So you can work all at different scales depending on what paper size that you're using. That seems to be all our questions. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Following our broadcast, I'm going to email you out a booklet about scales, and I'll include in the email information about different paper sizes and how they're called out, and the actual paper size that correlates to that. Thanks everyone for joining me for today's class. I hope you learned a lot about scales and can use that in your construction documents to print out in all different scales and all different types of views. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next week again. Bye-bye.